Alright, so if you recall from the last installment, this set is not working right. I restored it a couple years ago, and I last turned it on about 18 months ago, and it was playing fine then, but it sure isn't now. The horizontal and vertical sync are both totally out of whack. It's almost impossible to get a stable image on the screen. The sound isn't so hot. And the picture tube, it's not as bright or as focused as I would expect it to be. This is one of those nice aluminized 10fp4 picture tubes, so it should be much brighter and crisper than the 10bp4s that most of my sets have in them. So, when I recapped this, I used pretty good quality parts, basically all Mallory plastic film name brand caps and spray orange drop. Replaced a bunch of the resistors with either metal film or metal oxide, or a few wire wounds here and there, but there still are some original carbon comps. And by the way, this is original where they doubled them up in series or parallel. I think maybe there was a part shortage, or they couldn't quite get the right values or wattages using off-the-shelf components, so that's how they wired it up. Alright, so I printed out some of the key service info from riders. I've got various waveforms. I can check on the scope. I think I'll do that first, especially on the sync tubes. Got a schematic, and I have a voltage chart, so I can check each of the tubes and see what voltage I have on them. So I want to first off focus right in on the sync circuitry. So we go from the antenna through the tuner, through the IF stages and video detector. Well, after the video amplifier, they pick off a signal and it goes around over down here to a phase inverter, a clamper, and a clipper, and the output of that goes to the horizontal oscillator and the vertical oscillator. So this is where I want to focus in right here. So let's see, what's that? V11. Do they have any waveforms for V11? Yeah, they do. Alright, so let's check that out. Let's see if that is what we get in the cathode of V11B. Yeah, okay. So that would be this point right here. Should be 10 volts and look like that. Well, here's what I've got on the cathode of that tube, and it's pretty much right. I've got it on the 2 volts per division, so 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. So it's a little low, I guess. It's a little hard to tell because of this video signal noisy stuff down here, which I just kind of illustrate here by these lines. So the shape is right. Maybe perhaps the amplitude's a little bit low, but I don't think that's enough to make it all wacky. So let's move on and check on this guy. Horizontal AFC cathode, so automatic frequency control, which sure doesn't seem to be working, right? Because there's nothing on the screen right now. Okay, here's what I've got on the cathode of the AFC tube, which is this guy right there, pin 6. The shape is right, but it's really erratic. I think that's where we've got some trouble. I assume it's supposed to be a stable waveform. Yeah, because it's all so crazy. That's why it's not locking. So it looks like it's trying to lock, but it's failing. So I will start investigating around in this area. So the first thing I'll do is just check the resistors. I'll turn the set off, of course, and let the caps discharge. And then I'll start checking. So, in other words, the signal at pin 3 seemed to be okay. But pin 6 here, not so much. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on here. It's fairly complex. Could be as simple as adjusting the horizontal frequency trimmer cap, which I guess would be like a coarse adjustment to get the thing more or less in the right frequency, and then the AFC circuit's supposed to lock it in to the incoming signal. And there's a horizontal hold control. Well, we're looking at the schematic. This is a fairly wacky design too. As I was refreshing my memory and going over it, look at the sound. A couple 6AU6s for the audio IF. Nothing strange there, but then we get this 6SH7 limiter, and then they use a 6AQ7. I think it's the only set I've ever come across use a 6AQ7. So we got a dual diode in there for the discriminator, and then it also has a built-in triode in the same tube. So it's a dual diode triode in one tube, and then a 6K6 for the audio output. I'm far more used to seeing a ratio detector rather than a discriminator. I think I may have found the problem. I started working my way back through the circuitry to this point here, the sync clipper. So on the grid of that, that's pretty much what I've got. But when I check the plate, pin 2, nothing. No signal detected. So, that sure doesn't look right. So there'd certainly be a signal on the plate of that tube. So, I will check, well, for one, I'll check the tube, make sure it's seated properly, and then it's good. And then I will check those two resistors and that cap, but that cap's a new cap, so it's probably alright. But that 1.6K and the 8.2K, those are original carbon resistors, right there and there. Actually, that guy and that guy, so they could be bad. I'm fairly confident that the problem is somewhere right around in here. That's the sync tube. So I checked the resistors, and now I'm checking the mica caps. And I'm on the last one in that particular circuit. There's 4 of them. And no leakage. And the values were all pretty much dead on, except for this one. It should be 390 picofarads. But I'm getting an eye open at more like 1100. And the eye is not opening very sharply. So that's what I mean by an open eye. Just for comparison's sake, I'll hook up a 470 picofarad, which is higher than 390. So this one should read under it on the scale. In other words, if say the 470 reads here, 390 should be sort of over here. So this is where this one was measuring at 390. So this being 470 should be higher, right? Nope. And if I go down, it opens way over here. So this one in the set that should be lower than this cap is measuring quite a bit higher. But something else, check out this one when the eye is fully open. Nice, sharp, distinct, completely open, whereas the other one was fuzzy and blurry. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I would think it would mean that there's leakage. However, the leakage test doesn't show any leakage. But either way, that sure doesn't look good to me. So I will try to dig up a 390 picofarad mica cap. I'm not entirely sure I've got any. I dug up a brand new 390 picofarad mica cap and installed it. And it's helped a bit, but it's still pretty touchy. So right now it's locked alright, but if I just touch the horizontal hold, I lose it. But it is possible to get a more stable picture. And the vertical hold seems better too. So I'm still not at all happy with that, but seems to be some sort of progress. Now the sound still stinks too. So I wasn't able to detect a signal on the plate of the sync clipper tube using my Hewlett-Packard digital scope, which just seemed odd because everything else was chucking out okay in that circuitry. So I pulled out my old Tektronix 465, and yeah, it's definitely a signal on the plate, and it looks just like it's supposed to. And after changing out that mica cap, as I said, the sync is stable if you're very careful with adjusting it, but a slight touch of either control, and I just can't believe that it would be this touchy in normal operation. Well, I just spent the better part of a Sunday afternoon checking and double checking waveforms and voltages and resistors and capacitors, and didn't find any smoking guns. I thought I did a few points, found a mica cap that seemed a little flaky, replaced that. I thought I found a point in a tube where the voltage was wrong, but it turns out that there's an error in the rider's voltage chart. I printed one out from Sam's too, and that showed 5 volts like I was measuring resistor. It should be 0 volts. And thinking about it, that makes sense that it can't be 0 volts because there's a resistor from that cathode to ground, and if there's any current flowing through the tube, there's going to be a voltage drop across that resistor, so it can't be 0 volts. So, finally, I turned my attention to what I probably should have checked a lot sooner, which is the actual vertical and horizontal hold control. After all, what was the problem? A very touchy vertical and horizontal adjustment. Well, maybe it's because the control's bad. So I popped it out and disconnected a couple wires to make sure that I was making true and accurate measurements on it. Well, the vertical at first seemed really bad till I hit it with some deoxit, and now it works fairly well. It should be a 50K pot. That's about what I'm getting. And the wiper travels smoothly from one extreme to the other. However, the horizontal, not so much. It's actually open across the outer 2 terminals, or at least intermittent, and so is the wiper. There's a large section of the wiper travel where I'm getting infinite resistance, and some other sections I get some small sections where it's actually about what I would expect it to be, and then it goes open again, or the value starts shooting all over. So when I was having so much trouble adjusting a horizontal hold, it's not because there's anything wrong with the sync circuitry, the tubes or anything. It's because the control is falling apart. I imagine inside here the carbon track is falling apart and has some dead spots on it. That, or it's incredibly dirty. I've tried spraying deoxit in there a couple times. It really hasn't helped. And in fact, I think it may have made things worse. Before I was at least intermittently measuring some resistance between the 2 outer lugs, and now it's just dead open, so I may have kind of washed away the last bits of carbon. Alright, great, so I know I've got a flaky control. Well, what do I do about it? Unfortunately, as you can see, it's not exactly an off-the-shelf component. It's a dual 50K pot, which in and of itself isn't that unusual, but check out the shaft. It's custom made to go with these GE knobs. And it's quite a long shaft, too. So, well, one thing I suppose I can try doing is repairing this. It is possible to get these apart. Not so easy to do without damaging them. To get the bottom section open, which is the horizontal, I'll have to take apart the top section. It looks like prying up these tabs carefully on either side, taking the top section off, which will let me get at the tabs on the bottom section to get that open, and then see what the situation is. Maybe it's clogged with dirt. I think it's far more likely that the carbon's worn through and disintegrating. So I will check that, and in the meantime I can take a couple individual 50K pots or anything that's even close to this, as long as they're 50K more or less, whether they're 2 separate pots or a dual pot with a different shaft. Doesn't matter, just to make sure that that actually is the problem. The set works better, and then I'll worry about what to do about it. I'll try to repair this. If I can't, of course, I'll ask around, see if anybody's got a spare one. I'll hunt through my junk box. You never know. I've gotten lucky before, but I don't recall seeing anything quite like this before. I temporarily wired in a replacement for that horizontal hold control. It's supposed to be 50K. I just dug up 100K, but I figured that'd be close enough for a test. And it fixed the problem. So I'm rotating it now, and it's a piece of cake to get a horizontal lock. No problem at all. And the lock's right about in the center of the controls range. As I go to either side, it does exactly what a horizontal hold control typically does. And now that I've cleaned the vertical control, that works just fine too. Now, another issue I've got, I'll illustrate after I turn the set off and let it cool down for a little while. Well, here's the control removed from the set. I'll see what I can do about fixing it. Poked around a little bit, and first things I came across were knobs, or controls rather, I'd taken out of some Admiral sets I had parted out recently. And the outer shaft is actually the same, more or less, and the knobs do fit on there with just a bit of play, but obviously the shafts are much longer and the inner shaft is different. Plus, neither of these is the correct value. So much for that. I will keep digging. In the meantime, let's see what I can do with this. Now, there is another possibility. The vertical hold is okay. It's just the horizontal hold that's bad. So I could just install this control as is, put the knobs on it, and hide a horizontal control somewhere else inside. I've seen a set, even, you may recall a while ago, tabletop Bakelite Admiral, somebody had drilled a hole and installed a focus control in the back because the complex 3-suction control up front of the focus part had burned out. So it's certainly not unheard of. And horizontal hold, now that it's working better, or properly with this control, it seems to be fairly stable. So, you could put it in the back, hide it somewhere, and it probably won't need to get adjusted all that often. And you put a note inside for future owners to explain what's going on. So I may just end up doing that if I can't find a control. And then, I'll keep looking for one, but in the meantime I can put the set back together and fire it up. Now, if I do that, I'm not going to drill a hole. I'm just saying you could do that. I wouldn't do that. I'll just leave the control, somewhere where I can kind of get at it. Just run some wires and not cut holes or drill holes into anything. I was able to pry the tabs up in the top section, so there's the insides and that black ring down in there. Well, I was going to say that's the carbon track, but no. It just occurred to me the carbon is on the inside top. Boy, is that gunky, man. So this is the section that's still good. And I'm going to get in there with a Q-tip and clean that gunk out. And then hopefully I'll be able to keep using it. For the bottom section, there's 4 tabs I wanted to get at. So carefully pry those up, and then get to the bottom section, and the same deal, pry these tabs back on the bottom section, and then see what's going on inside there. Well, here is the horizontal hold section, and I found exactly what I thought I would. Carbon's completely worn away from most of the travel on the shaft. So probably just from years of use, it's just gone. So here's the section from here to about here. There's still some carbon left, but from about here over to here, it's just gone. There's still little traces left of sludge from it scraping around. So, well, I know some guys are going to extreme lengths on like more rare, really old radios. of depositing new carbon down, like with conductive paint. Or if you can find something that's the right size, you could replace the resistive section. However, this isn't that type of control. Like I know, it's like some Clarostats and IRC controls. They're made to be kind of taken apart and rebuilt, or you can build them up from scratch from individual parts. And one of those parts is the carbon track, which is mounted on a substrate, and it can be taken out and replaced. This looks like the carbon was deposited directly onto this Bakelite or plastic frame. So I don't see really any hope of replacing that. Well, the first thing I will do is post some pictures online and ask around. You never know, somebody might have one. Okay, another issue is that when I first turn the set on, the image is horribly out of focus and rather dim. I figure that's either because the CRT is weak or it's because the voltages on the CRT are not correct. Could be the high voltage, could be the voltage on cathode G1, G2 down at the base. So as you can see, that's just horrible, horrible. Totally unwatchable. But it will gradually get better. So it's easy enough to test the CRT, and if that checks out good, then I will check the high voltage. And now finally the picture is starting to look about like it should normally. I posted in the classifieds at Video Karma, and I've got a lead already on a replacement control. So I'll keep my fingers crossed. In the meantime, I'm testing the 10FP4 CRT. And no shorts, kind of figured that. Okay, you've got cutoff control. It's also coming awake really quick, which is good. So it's got excellent emissions. And fantastic life test. So my theory that the CRT was nearly dead and that's why it takes so long to come online and focus seems to not be the case. So now I'm thinking it's got to be something in the high voltage area. It's actually, I mean, it's good and bad. Good that the CRT is good, but bad and that this stuff can be rather problematic to troubleshoot. Simplest thing to do though is I'll test the rectifier tube. That's the one tube I did not check because I so rarely have trouble with them. I just didn't even bother, but hey, who knows? Maybe it's as simple as replacing that. Okay, I'll keep the probe on here as best I can while the set power's up. Go. Okay, that's definitely low. This is supposed to be about 9,000 volts. Wow, well that is encouraging because I got an image on the CRT right now. I'm only at 3,500 volts. It's only about a third of what it should be. So, we got a lot of room for improvement. Of course, now it's a matter of figuring out why is it so low. I look back at old photos and the video footage from this set, and for sure it had a sharper picture back then. So the hold, that was simple enough to figure out. The hold control was a little out of whack, but what could have made the high voltage be half of what it should be? You can see it's slowly climbing. The picture's getting a little bit better, but I don't expect this to climb all the way up to 9,000 or... Yeah, it says 9,000 on the schematic. So one possibility, actually no, I was going to say it could be that 470k resistor. So I get the frame there. Except that I got the probe right now, right on that filter capacitor, so the resistor is not a factor. Sometimes there's a current limiting resistor in series with the 1v3 rectifier. That's not there. So, I will check all the stuff in horizontal output. Maybe I'm lucky and it's just the 82 ohm resistor on the horizontal output tube has drifted high. Alright, so we are just about at exactly half of what the high voltage should be. I don't think it's going to go up much higher because this image is about as bright and sharp as it's been this whole time I've been working on this set. I noticed the height is a bit out of whack now. I'm sure that's because the replacement vertical hold control I just put in the set is not quite the right value. So I can adjust the height in the back of the set to compensate for that.